Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Milwaukee Public Library interviewing candidates in the 2014 elections. We're interviewing Jonathan Steitz of Pleasant Prairie. He's a Republican running in the 21st Senate District. Jonathan, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Jonathan, let's start out this way. I know you ran for the Senate before and against Senator Wirch, Democratic Senator Wirch, but give us the short version of your bio.
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. I ran in 2011 in the first set of recalls back in what was the 22nd district, which was basically Kenosha County plus Burlington. And that was a Democratic-leaning district, but I thought that Bob Wirch needed to be held accountable, so I jumped into that race. And this is an interesting race because it's a brand new district. A lot of people don't realize how new of a district it is, but almost half the district is made up of areas where I've run before. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But to remind people of my bio, you know, my background is all in the private sector. I would have to start with, you know, what's most important to me, and that's married for almost 9 years, have a wonderful, very supportive wife. We have 4 young children, ages 11, 9, 6, and 4, 2 boys and 2 girls. So life is busy. I like to joke that I decided to run for state senate because I was looking for something to do in my spare time. But you know, like I said, my background's all in the private sector. When I was 23 years old, a little over a year out of after I graduated from college, started my own business. I had a production company that did sound and lighting and eventually staging and so forth for live events, and ran that for about 7.5 years. It required a lot of travel, so once we started having kids, I was looking for kind of what was next for me in life, and had the opportunity in 2004. I ended up selling my business and went back to school, and I got my law degree and my MBA at Northwestern, so did a dual degree program. When I graduated, I went to work at a large law firm, worked in capital markets, and we actually lived in London for 3 years and then continued working there. And shortly after we moved back from London is when I ran against Bob Wirch. But then, probably something a lot of people don't know, 2 years ago I actually moved up to Baird in Milwaukee. So I'm no longer a practicing lawyer. I joke that I'm a recovering attorney. So you know, I've worked in financial services now for the last little over 2 years, and so that's kind of my background.
Well, it's kind of interesting because Senator Van served in the Senate. Then he lost. He was recalled. That's right. Now he's running again, as you say, in a new district. What prompts you to challenge him, sir? Any specific issues?
Well, there's a number of issues. You know, I think from a big picture perspective, it's that this is now one of the most conservative districts in the state. And I think when we have a district this conservative, we really need to make sure that we're electing somebody that's going to be a reliable conservative, going to bring fresh new ideas. And I think, you know, we desperately need people in government that have, you know, real significant business experience and really understand finance and accounting and so forth. And the bottom line is, I respect Van. I like him. I consider him a friend, but I don't think he's been a very reliable conservative leader. And you know, we need you know, people in elected office that are willing to be accountable for their positions. And I have taken very specific positions. I've been very open about them. You know, I think I can defend my positions well, and I'm willing to be held accountable for the positions I take. And unfortunately, I think Van too often has tried to make excuses. He's blamed other people, and he hasn't taken real solid positions on a lot of important conservative issues.
Can you give me one specific example? And the reason I asked, when we interviewed Van, he said, look, I took the tough vote against Act 10. I absorbed death threats, you know, family threats to my family. I think I've delivered as a conservative, but one specific issue where you fault him, sir?
Well, I'll bring Act 10. He did vote for Act 10, and I'm thankful for that. You know, the bottom line is people in the district know this, and they remember this. There was a question whether he was going to vote for Act 10. There was a lot of arm twisting behind the scenes. I've talked to people that were involved in that. You know, Van was working with Dale Schultz behind the scenes on compromise legislation that I certainly wouldn't have agreed with. Now, there's multiple news reports regarding that. Van has denied some of the details in those, and that's fine. But you know, even the thing that can't be denied is that Van insisted that civil service protections be expanded before he would vote for it. as a conservative, I don't agree with that. You know, I think that really perpetrated the notion that there's one set of rules for the public sector workers and one set of rules for the private sector workers. And I think, you know, I would be fighting, and a lot of conservatives think that it's time to reform civil service laws in this state, not to expand them. And so I think that's a very good example. And so, you know, I think he wasn't as solid as on that issue as he could have been and what we should have in this new district. And it's an example of where he's, in my opinion, really going back and after the fact trying to kind of change history and what really happened there. He did vote for Act 10, I give him credit for that, but he wasn't, you know, he wasn't solidly there. He wasn't philosophically behind Act 10, in my opinion.
Okay, now let's talk about some specific issues. Let's talk about two with schools.
Sure.
A major issue for the next session will be school choice vouchers, whether to expand them statewide, continue the 1,000 cap outside of the 2 urban cities. Your position on choice and charter schools?
I have been a huge advocate for school choice early and often. I work with a group called the Heartland Institute, which has really taken a leading position on some school choice areas and anti-Common Core as well. Now I'm a budget and tax policy advisor, but I've also done some work with them on school choice and done some speaking. You know, I've been very influenced by a man named Milton Friedman, who was an economist. He's deceased now, but he was very influential in the Reagan administration, and you know, back in the 50s he was talking about school choice. And so philosophically, where I come from, and this is a lot of what the Milton Friedman Foundation pushes for, but I believe in education savings accounts, and it's the idea that we should be spending, or we should as a society be paying for children's education. It's called a neighborhood effect if you're talking about economics. You know, we all benefit from having educated children. Where we've gone wrong, in my opinion, is that doesn't necessarily mean that just because society as a whole is paying for the education doesn't mean that government should be involved in the administration of the education necessarily. So I want funding to follow the children. And Arizona is the only state that's really doing this right now. But let's set up an education savings account. We're spending almost $12,000 a student, you know, give or take some, depending on what stats you look at. Let's put that money in an account, empower parents to really make the decision on what is the best education for their children, whether that be a public school, whether that be a charter school, whether that be a private school, or whether that be homeschooling. And I think that the parent is in the best place to make the decision for the children. And I think what that really does, the beauty of it, is that opens up a free market system of competition in our education system. And I think that's what's sorely lacking. And I think that is really the only thing that's going to save our public schools is when we, you know, force them to compete with other schools, and that's going to improve quality. And I'm really focused, because of that, you know, I'm obviously very focused on the child's education and what's going to benefit the child the most.
You mentioned Common Core. Do you think Wisconsin should be one of the states that is withdrawing from Common Core?
I absolutely do, and that is one area where I will fight like crazy, and will be a leader in that area. And I think, you know, one place where Republicans have got it wrong is that too many Republicans are looking at what are the standards. Are they good standards? Are they bad standards? And I've even heard my opponent in the primary talk about that. In my opinion, the standards themselves are irrelevant. I am against Common Core because I don't want the federal government in any way, shape, or form dictating to us what the standards are or what the curriculum is going to be at the local school level. That has got to be the purview of the local community.
Okay, and healthcare. Federal government, as you know, told the states, we'll pay if you expand the MA program, healthcare for more low income.
Correct.
Governor Walker and the leaders of the Senate and Assembly said, no thanks.
Right.
Was that the right decision?
I think so, and you know, I'm always looking for ways. In my opinion, obviously, I don't agree with Obamacare. I think it's moving healthcare in exactly the wrong direction. We, again, just like in schools, we've got to introduce free market competition into our healthcare system. And when we have the government getting involved, and I'm afraid we're heading towards a single payer system eventually when the government starts getting involved and you start skewing that free market system, that's a problem. I want to see us moving towards things like, you know, high deductible insurance where we have a health savings account. That's what I've had over the last few years, and it's amazing the difference when you've got skin in the game. You start caring about how much stuff costs, and when you don't, when you have insurance paying for everything, or when you have the government involved paying for everything, people don't care about what the costs are, and that's the real problem. And you can see that play out when you look at some of the procedures that aren't typically covered by insurance. You know, there you've seen costs come down and quality go up when you look at things like LASIK and things like that. And so I think if we have that system of free market competition in the healthcare system, that's really where we need to be headed.
Transportation. The 21st Senate District has the interstate and important artery going through it. But there's a $650 million projected deficit in the next 2-year budget, State Department of Transportation. Do we delay some of these major projects, or do we raise taxes, or do you have a third option?
Well, I think number one we got to do is look at efficiency, and I think, you know, again, the government has a really poor track record of doing things efficiently, and so, you know, I think we need more people like myself that have real private sector experience that can go in and start looking at some of these programs and say, you know, where can we really draw out efficiency, because that's what we've had to do in the private sector to stay profitable. I am in favor of keeping that as a segregated fund. I don't want that to be you know, supplemented by general revenues. I don't think that we need to have, you know, more of those types of projects being funded out of income taxes and so forth. So we've got to look at what, you know, at several options. We need to be looking for creative options on how we pay for this. But obviously, you know, there is an issue there, and I think we've got to make sure that we're addressing it so that the people that are really using the roads are the ones that are paying the vast majority of it.
Raising the S-tax and what you and I pay for license plate registration fees, not an option with you, Jonathan?
No, not, I mean, it's got to be looked at as a total package, in my opinion. And I think everything has to stay on the table, but you know, certainly my first priority is to see what can we do to reduce costs and what can we do to increase efficiency.
I'm asking all candidates this question in reaction to Judge Crabb's ruling, which is now being appealed by the Attorney General on same-sex marriage.
On same-sex marriage? Look, the main thing for me on this issue is that we have had a constitutional amendment. It's gone through 2 sessions of the legislature. It's been passed by the people of Wisconsin. Now, I'm not, you know, I'm personally opposed to same-sex marriage. I'm not blind to the fact that, you know, public sentiment on this issue is changing, but I don't think it's going to be a satisfactory answer to have it decided in the courts. And I think if public sentiment has changed enough that we can reverse that amendment, while I personally wouldn't support it, that's the route we need to go. And I think that's the answer for a lot of these social issues. You know, I'm a federalist. I believe that we don't need to have a one-size-fits-all system across the United States. And you know, some states can have different stances than other states on issues like abortion and same-sex marriage, in my opinion. 2
candidates for Attorney General say first offense drunken driving should be a crime. Should it?
You know, it's not an issue I've spent a lot of time on. I do think that we need to be careful about you know, not making a mistake when somebody's young impact the rest of their lives, but I do think we've got to be, you know, this is something we need to take seriously, and we need to make sure that we're being strong. And I'm very, you know, pro law enforcement. I want to make sure that we are having the kind of policies in place that is going to discourage people from drinking and driving. But that, honestly, it's not a position that I've spent a lot of time on focusing on.
There are calls in Washington and Madison to raise the minimum wage. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely opposed. Absolutely, yeah.
Why?
I mean, like I said, I believe in the free market. I think that just like the free market should set prices for goods, the free market should set the prices for labor as well. And I think anytime you get the government involved in skewing that, it has unintended consequences.
Your website says that there have been some changes that have been held up and blocked in the Senate that you would vote for. Wondering, could you list a few of those, sir?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm running, because I think, you know, we have such an opportunity right now in Wisconsin to continue making fundamental changes. You know, we've done a lot under Governor Walker that, in my opinion, has got the state moving in the right direction, but we have a long ways to go still. And we've got a strong majority in the Assembly. We've got obviously a reform-minded governor, but time and time again, important conservative legislation has either gotten watered down or died in the Senate. And that's why this seat, when we have such a conservative district, it's so important that we elect somebody that's going to be a reliable conservative that's going to really advance the conservative agenda. So just to give you, I mean, a couple of examples, and conservatives can probably name more that I'll miss, but you know, Common Core is a huge issue. We couldn't even get that out of committee onto a floor vote so that we could hold those that were, you know, in favor of Common Core accountable, and I think that's shameful. The tax decreases that we've gotten through, while they've been good, I think they've been relatively modest, and even those have had a hard time getting through the Senate, and they've been watered down. There have been a number of pro-life legislation that has not been able to get through the Senate recently. So there's been a number of issues, and that's, you know, ultimately one of the big reasons that I'm running for this seat and why I think this seat is so important for the state of Wisconsin. And we need people that are going to bring fresh ideas, that have that real the business experience, and bring bold ideas to the table.
A big issue in southeast Wisconsin is a proposed Kenosha casino. Do you have a position on that?
I'm in favor of the casino. I do think it's going to be a good thing for our economy, the local economy, especially with Hard Rock being involved. That was a real game changer for me, but I think with Hard Rock involved, we have the opportunity for that to be a regional, entertainment destination and the kind of thing that will attract conferences and conventions and so forth to our area. And I do think it's got to be part of a broader economic development plan. We have a real asset in that area with the I-94 corridor, our proximity to both Chicago and Milwaukee, and we need to make sure that we're utilizing the assets to drive real economic development in that area.
Your campaign yesterday put out a press release saying you were endorsed by the leader of the Northwoods, Kim Sumac.
Kim Sumac?
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a Tea Party candidate?
Well, I don't look at this as labels. It doesn't matter to me what the labels are. I consider myself a principled conservative. I had a broad range of support. We've got a number of known conservative groups that are supporting me. We do have a lot of Tea Party members that are supporting me, both inside the district and outside the district. But I'm not worried about what the labels of those people are. What I'm focused on is what can we do to reduce the size of government, what can we do to reduce taxation, what can we do to make Wisconsin more competitive, and what can we do to increase the education choices in our state. Okay.
And you think there's a very striking difference between you and Van?
I think.
Weingard.
Look, I supported Van through the recall. I think any conservative would have. It's again, I'm not running because I think Van's a bad guy or anything. I'm running because I think when we have a district this conservative, we can do a little better than that. And I've told people it's a oversimplification in some ways, but Van was a perfect candidate for the old 21st district, which is a 48% Republican district. We now have a district that's almost a 60% Republican district. Let's make sure we are electing a reliable conservative that has the right ideas, will really be a leader for our region, rather than somebody where we're going to have to wonder where they might come out on some issues.
Thank you. Jonathan Steitz of Pleasant Prairie is a Republican candidate in the 21st Senate District. The primary is August 12th. Jonathan, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.